That's right.
Yeah, trying to figure out how to
1, 2, 3,
do this. Here we go. Yeah.
Well, we have a quorum, so that's not a problem.
Yeah.
That's my main concern always.
Hi, Aiden.
There's Kita.
And please remember that you have to say where you are and where you are remotely joining the meeting from.
Okay, and you're gonna call people and they'll answer
Say that
where
they're
they
from
are.
Michigan or wherever, and the state of Michigan.
Okay. Oh, Jessica, which I bet is Michael, but I'm not sure. Who else
Okay.
isn't here? Is there anybody
No,
else?
not yet.
Huh?
No, not yet.
Okay. But 7:01, we really could start.
Wait, I have an important question. Did you graduate?
I did graduate.
Oh, you did?
Oh,
Congratulations.
I am
Congratulations.
thrilled. Thank you so much. It was towards the end of the semester. It was a slog, especially those last 3 weeks. But I had a great time. I was thankfully able to speak, so I had an in-person component to it as well, whereas it was largely virtual. And I moved back to Ann Arbor next month, so I'm gonna
Great.
hopefully see a lot of you guys in person.
Excellent.
But yeah, it was a great time. Thank you for asking.
Sure, congratulations.
Congratulations.
Some other pretty big news too. That I'm gonna put.
Oh boy. I also got into a master's program at Penn. I'm
Whoa.
able to do it virtually, so I don't have to leave Ann Arbor.
Okay.
So I'll do that concurrently with my work at Google. So yeah, hoping to learn a lot. I get a lot of a break in
You're gonna be
between
busy.
undergrad and masters. Yeah, but yeah, it's
Busy
gonna be a great
man.
time.
Aiden, what's your master's going to be in?
So it's going to have a concentration in American studies. So think in this instance, political theory and American history. I looked at an MPA, but a lot of those were so quantitatively heavy that I could go through another avenue.
Yeah, great. That's great.
Good. Well, let's get started because we've got a big agenda and we want to spend the time on it. Okay, so welcome to the Ann Arbor Human Rights Commission. Denise, you want to call roll?
Sure. Vice Chair Garber,
Present, calling in from Wellfleet, Massachusetts.
okay. Chair Sandbach,
Present, and I'm calling in from Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Commissioner Doss,
Present.
Where are you calling from?
calling from, yeah,
Ann Arbor.
Michigan, okay. Councilmember Nelson,
Present, and I'm calling in from City of Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Commissioner Dent,
Present, and I'm calling in from Ypsilanti, Michigan.
thank you. Commissioner Silva,
Present, and I'm calling in from Jackson, Michigan.
Commissioner Winkler,
Hi, I'm here and I'm calling in from Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Commissioner Cowan,
Hello, I'm also here and I'm also in Ann Arbor.
and Councilmember Travis, Radina rather.
I am here and I am calling in from Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Okay, have I missed anyone? Oh, yeah,
Me.
sure, Commissioner Cass.
Hi, you guys. I am here and I am calling in from Plymouth, Michigan.
Names move around when I go down the list, so I have to look right. Okay. So
It's
we have
okay. I don't mind being last ever.
that's not the intent. Okay, we have a quorum.
Super. I will introduce our guests in a minute, but before I do, please, can we have a motion to accept the agenda?
I move to accept the agenda.
I second.
And
All in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
Thank you. We are very lucky.
Public comments, Leslie?
Oh, I'm sorry, public comments. I forgot about that. Are there any public comments? Denise, I
You're
can't
on
hear you.
mute.
Sorry about that. Yes, I think we have one caller,
Okay.
Miss Jessica Latal. Hold on. Will you
Um,
please unmute?
She may not be a caller.
Okay, just a visitor.
Well, she works with Michael Steinberg, so I don't
Oh,
know how
okay.
she's here, but
Okay, then
yes.
that's it for us.
Okay. Then. So did we approve the agenda or not? We did. Okay. So Michael Steinberg, let me introduce you. And are you with Jessica, Michael?
Yes, in
Okay.
everything.
Okay.
No, Jessica's part of the advisory board of Justice Indeed, the project that we're going to talk about.
Okay. Well, let me give you two sentence introduction, since you
Okay.
didn't write me one and I had I'm making one up. We feel very lucky to have you. We've had you before. You've helped us, I think, with the non-discrimination ordinance, and always valuable. And I'm glad you're here again. You were for 22 years the legal director of the American Civil Liberties Union, working on all the litigation that organization dealt with in 22 years. That's pretty impressive. And then he now joined the faculty of the University of Michigan Law School, and is the founding director of the Civil Rights Litigation Initiative, which sounds very interesting, and maybe you'll want to talk to us about that at some point. Do you want to introduce Jessica?
Yeah, Jessica is the executive director of Building Matters, that looks at many things dealing with housing, equity issues, segregation, integration, etc.
And you're going to speak to us today on racially restrictive covenants.
Yes.
Our history.
Sure. I can tell you a little bit about the clinic that I started at the University of Michigan Law School. I teach civil rights litigation there, and we've been going for about 1.5 years with the Civil Rights Litigation Initiative, where students have the opportunity to litigate important civil rights cases under my supervision. You might be interested in some of the cases that we're working on. We're representing a Black man from Farmington Hills who was arrested and jailed for 30 hours because he was identified as a thief by facial recognition technology. If you saw 60 Minutes on Sunday, he was featured there. More locally, we're representing Black Lives Matter protesters in Chelsea, and we got the charges dismissed against them. We are working in Ann Arbor with Black Pioneer High School students to expose and address the racially hostile environment that many of them experience. And so, yeah, that's what we do. And I'm calling in from Ann Arbor. I've lived here for about 35 years. Before I went to the ACLU, I was a civil rights attorney here. And my most well-known case was and I'm happy to talk about that at another time because it still reverberates, but it was the civil rights case arising out of the Ann Arbor serial rapist investigation.
Oh, yeah.
So,
About the DNA?
the DNA dragnet, yes, and the targeting of basically all African-American men in Ann Arbor. So, yeah.
I have a feeling you'd like to hear about that. I certainly would.
I'm happy to talk to you about it. So one of the projects that we started at the Civil Rights Litigation Initiative was an idea, it developed out of an idea to address the fact that racially restrictive covenants exist on thousands and thousands of homes in Ann Arbor. And a lot of people don't know that. A lot of people don't know they still exist, even though they're not enforceable. Am I able to share my screen?
Denise? Is he able, where's Denise? We've just lost Denise.
I'm here. I'll make him
good. Thank you.
co-host.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Can he share the screen?
Sure.
In a second, yeah. I should have asked before.
Are you there?
Yeah,
Okay.
here we go. So this is my neighborhood. If you walk around my neighborhood, just for 2 minutes, you see signs like this every. Recognize that systemic racism exists in this country and that it's a major problem in places other than Ann Arbor. And you see signs such as this saying, hate has no home here. And it's a comforting narrative, but in fact, racism is actually built right into the very deed of houses that many of us live in, including me. And we wanted to raise this issue and let people know that systemic racism exists in Ann Arbor as well. Now, a racially restrictive covenant is a part of the deed that runs with the land. And it restricts who shall be able to occupy the house. And I'm going to show you a couple of examples of them. You notice they have all kinds of covenants, no fraternities, sororities, no commercial advertising. And then right in between is a very common one in Ann Arbor, which says no part of this of said land shall be occupied by persons not of the Caucasian race, except as guests or servants. Here's that one's on my home, in my subdivision in Wildwood, the Wildwood subdivision, west of downtown. This is in Lakewood. Every home in Lakewood has this racially restrictive covenant. Said premises shall at no time be used or occupied for manufacturing purposes, not by a colored person for any reason. Here's another one that an Ann Arbor resident named Mia Risberg, who is an artist, painted over when she found out that it existed on hers. And I don't know if you can see this, but it says right underneath this painting here, no portion of the land herein described shall be occupied by persons not wholly of the Caucasian race, except as servants or guests. I found out about this initially when I bought my first house in Ann Arbor, right next to where Linda Winkler lives. I was in law school at the time, and I actually read through my closing package, and I said, what the hell is this? And my real estate agent said, oh, don't worry about it. There's nothing you can do about it. They exist on many houses in Ann Arbor, and they're not enforceable, so it's no big deal. And I didn't necessarily agree. And then when I bought my second house here in the Wildwood subdivision, I asked the same question, and they said, you know, it would be very expensive to do anything about this. You'd have to go to court. And I told myself, eventually, I'm going to do something about it. And then, you know, as we were working on fair housing cases with the Civil Rights Litigation Initiative, I asked the students if they wanted to start a project like this, and we did. And it has gained a tremendous amount of momentum, and it's expanded to a community university collaboration. We have funding now through the University of Michigan Humanities Collaboratory Program, and it's really exciting. Let's see. That we aren't the only organization in the country to be looking at things like this. There's groups called there's a group out of Minneapolis called Mapping Prejudice, and a group out of Seattle called Segregated Seattle. And they both have done mapping. And so I recruited a friend of mine and a former ACLU intern, Rob Goodspeed, who's now a professor in urban planning at Michigan and one of the preeminent mapping GIS experts in the country. And he, with the help of some interns, have started to create a map. And it may have been shared with you before the meeting, I'm not sure, but I will pull it up here. This is a preliminary map, and we know that there's mistakes in it. But this is Ann Arbor. You know, this is Main Street and Huron, and you can see all the orange neighborhoods are neighborhoods with racially restrictive covenants. Now, these covenants came into place about 100 years ago, shortly after the US Supreme Court struck down racially restrictive zoning. It used to be that cities would allow people of color only to live in certain areas. That was struck down, and you know, real estate companies, banks, and others came to private agreements that when houses were built, they would place these racially restrictive covenants on the homes. And they were, so most of these racially restrictive covenants are in neighborhoods where the homes were built between around 1918 and 1948 or 50. And they were enforced. So when a person of color tried to buy a house, or the owner tried to buy a house, sell a house to a Black person, there would be lawsuits, and the courts would enforce them. And the Michigan Supreme Court said this is totally fine. The neighborhood associations, you know, were very proud that there was only an all-white neighborhood, and they used that to sell homes. And so most of the homes built in that time had racially restrictive covenants. In 1948, the US Supreme Court, in a case called Shelley versus Kramer, said that they were unenforceable, that enforcing a racially restrictive covenant was government action It violated the Equal Protection Clause. But they still exist on the home. They just weren't enforceable by the courts, and they weren't even illegal. They didn't become illegal until the Federal Fair Housing Act was passed in 1968. But even though they're illegal, they still are on our homes. So if you live in one of these areas and you buy a house and you look through your closing packet, you're going to see that the house is not supposed to be occupied by anybody but people of the Caucasian race. So if they're not enforceable, the question arose, why should we care? And we came up with 3 reasons. Number 1, they cause real harm now. You can imagine being a Black person or other person of color. And by the way, it used to be that Jewish people weren't considered to be Caucasians. So at some point, these applied to non-Christians as well. But you learn that your home has one of these things that's baked into the deed, and it causes harm. It's like having a whites only sign in the entrance to your neighborhood. You can't enforce it, but you see that, and you really don't feel welcome there. Another reason is we thought it would be useful as an educational tool to educate people that racism is a part of Ann Arbor, and white privilege is alive and well here in our fair city. And we wanted to do education about this to be part of the policy debates, when housing policy is developed, which is happening now in Ann Arbor. People should be aware of not only racially restrictive covenants, but other.
Can't hear him any longer.
I'm sorry, but
Okay.
other racist policies that led to the segregation. Some people moved to Ann Arbor, which is part of the 8th most segregated area in the country. And they see these signs out there and they wonder, why is it so segregated? And, maybe it's a matter of choice. It's just so expensive. But these racially restrictive covenants stripped people of color of wealth. They stripped people of color of opportunities. They led to segregated schools. And this should all be considered when developing policy today. So we felt very strongly that this should not be just a project of the law school or of the university. And so we have created an advisory board of which Jessica is a member. And I'm going to share this so you can see who's on our board. And this board is helping to guide our decisions. And we have an education committee and a policy committee and a history committee. And it's up and kicking, and it's been a great experience working with them. And then we have, we just got this grant from the university to help with our work and to expand the work and to create a historical context for racially restrictive covenants and segregation and all that. Matthew Countryman is the primary investigator. He is the department head of DAS, the Department of Afro-American and African Studies. We have Jennifer Jones from history, Stephen Ward from DAS, and Claire Zimmerman from Art and Architecture. And we've have the resources to really develop this program and talk about the history of segregation and the history of the Black community in Washtenaw County, and not just in Ann Arbor. So I'm going to stop there and leave time for questions. I could go on and on about this. And since I've become a professor, I seem to talk more than I used to, but I think it's an occupational hazard. So yeah.
Questions?
Linda, should I?
Thanks, Michael. A few of us spent some time in the Bentley Library. How long ago was it, Keita, Leslie?
Yes.
I don't know, a year and a half ago.
Maybe.
When we found out that the city was redrawing its master plan and we're going to revisit the whole zoning situation, we started looking at the old maps to try to figure out, where the Black communities were, why they were where they were. And so, it's kind of an overwhelming task. So I am so appreciative that you are forming this. And I assume with an intent of working with the city planners to see how the history can affect policy going forward, particularly on things like zoning. Is that right?
Yeah, actually, our first presentation was to the Ann Arbor Planning Commission. They got wind of this early on, and yeah, so that's the idea. We'll probably go back to them as we develop resources and learn more about the history of discrimination. Part of what we hope to do is not only expose the fact that they exist and educate both the community and policymakers, but we hope to eliminate them in some way going forward. We have a plan. It could be done through litigation or legislation or by community organizing. And it's possible that we might be doing a bit of all three. But yeah, the idea is not just to let people know about it, but to make sure that they use this information going forward and they make informed choices and they understand why Ann Arbor is so segregated.
Thanks.
Steinberg, are you able to determine how those clauses got into the deed?
Yeah, what happened most of the time is when a developer bought what became the subdivision, they divided it up into plats, and each plat in the subdivision would have one of these racially restrictive covenants. It was partially to make it more desirable, but it was also partially dictated by lending practices of the banks. The banks thought that the value of the land would be higher if it was all white. And many times the banks, in order to give a loan to the developer, said you have to have a racially restricted covenant there. So that's usually when it happened, before the houses were built. And that's why you see it spread out over the city the way you do. There's probably other ways too. I mean, existing homes, I wouldn't be surprised if neighborhood associations got together like they did in Detroit and other places and decided, to keep it exclusively Caucasian, they would adopt it. But most of them occurred, I think, and we'll find out more when the homes were, the areas were developed.
Okay.
What I find amazing is that it has been unenforceable since 1948 and illegal since 1960 something, and yet it still exists even though people have come and gone. I mean, this is people keep the white neighborhoods tend to stay white regardless.
Yeah, I mean, if you do mapping about wealth and you know, you overlay various socioeconomic factors on the areas where there are racially restricted covenants, I think, which we plan to do, you'll see some interesting results. Ms. Dent, did you have a question?
Yes. Why is it so difficult to get it eliminated? I mean, you've indicated that it's, you know, costly litigation, a number of other things. So why is that? Why is there that difficulty in getting it eliminated?
Well, you have to, if you wanted to do it on your own, at this point, you probably have to hire a lawyer and figure out the correct language and get it recorded, which is expensive. And not many people have done that. Now, Larry Kestenbaum has been very, very supportive of our work. He gave us free access to the electronic records that enabled us to make the map, and we're working with him on this question. We've had a couple of presidents of homeowners associations that got wind that their neighborhood had these on, and they want to go about getting rid of it. Most of the racially restrictive covenants run with the land forever, but it gives the owners the ability to get rid of a covenant, whether it's on sororities or setbacks or racially restrictive covenants, if they get more than half of the homeowners to sign something. So they're interested in doing work on that, and we're going to be supporting them. And hopefully you'll be hearing more about this summer.
I appreciate the answer that you've given, but I guess my naivety is not understanding the difficulty. I mean, it seems to me, and I'm certain I'm probably speaking innocently, that it took next to nothing for it to be written into the documents. So since it took just that, why is it so difficult to get that removed? And I hear what you're saying, but I'm not appreciating why the onus is on the individual who purchases the property, or, you know, why isn't it just a matter of proposing it as legislation and having the Supreme Court? I mean, they've already done that, right? So why, one, to allude to what Keita said, does it still exist? And why the difficulty? Why isn't it just a matter of you put it in there, take it out?
Yeah, I get it. And it is pretty amazing that nobody has done something to address it, either through legislation or otherwise. And even in the Minneapolis and the Seattle projects, it's not a part of what they do. It shouldn't be hard. And it should be a matter of, there is some state legislation that's been proposed. It wouldn't automatically get rid of it. It would make it easier for an individual to get rid of the the covenant on their homes and reduce the cost of it. But I'm with you. I mean, just because it's a hassle doesn't mean that it shouldn't have already been done.
In Richard Rothstein's book, The Color of Law, he suggests that if people realize that the segregation, a lot of it was mandated by the government, that it was a policy, it wasn't people's preferences, it wasn't accidental, that maybe it would be easier to desegregate. Are you having any sense of how desegregation might work, and if this is a piece of it, just getting your word out?
Yeah, I mean, I actually have the book right here
It's a good book.
with lots of yellow stickies, and I highly recommend it. One of the things we're going to be looking at through the Humanities Collaboratory on Black Washtenaw County is the role that government played in creating segregation. And that's what the Rothstein book is about. This just didn't happen by itself. Now, in Ann Arbor, unlike in Detroit and some other larger cities in Detroit, there was not a redlining map. But we believe that segregation, they didn't need a map in Ann Arbor to enforce segregation, and it was done through racially restrictive covenants and the banks and the real estate agent. And we believe that, you know, the government was involved as well. For instance, we know that after racially restrictive zoning was struck down, you know, single family zoning was adopted with the idea is that there were large lots and the houses had to be built, had to be worth a certain amount of money. And there's plenty of evidence that that was adopted, at least in part, to maintain the segregation that already existed. So I'm sure, you know, Ann Arbor was a leader in passing the Fair Housing Ordinance. But I think if you go back to the early 1900s through the 50s, that as we're going to do, we're going to find a lot of evidence of that the government was complicit and encouraged and enforced the segregation.
Other people? Okay.
That's me again.
And
So what, if anything, can we as a Human Rights Commission do to collaborate with you or assist you or work with you or propose, you know, legislation to the council or whatever to aid in either getting this eliminated or whatever it takes to assist in getting this, I'm going to term it egregious language that, yeah, that clearly is harmful. It's, you know, I'm sure there's statistical data that would support that, but what, if anything, can we do to assist?
Well, thank you for that question. We are working it out within the advisory board, and I think it's likely that we may come back to you and ask you at minimum to pass a resolution as we figure out how we're going to address eliminating these racially restrictive covenants. I think you can be, I mean, I really appreciate the work of this commission, and I have for many, many years. But if it's okay, we will, I promise we'll get back to you on that. We're trying to do this all together with the community leaders, and we've talked about it a little bit, and I think there may be a resolution that we could suggest.
Wonderful.
I just want to emphasize, we're still at the planning. Did I tell you what the name of our organization is?
No,
So it used to be the Racially Restrictive Covenants Project. Now we call it Justice Indeed with a capital D-I-N-D. And we're creating a website. Got money to do that now. It's being built as we speak. And we can't wait to put the Human Rights Commission resolution on our website.
super. I think we'd be happy to do
Great,
it.
great name.
It is a good name.
It took us a little while, but it's stuck. Yeah.
Okay, anything else before we let them go? Thank you.
I have one quick question. If we want to get a copy of our own deeds, how does one go about doing
That's a
that?
good one.
Okay, so that map that I showed you, I should have mentioned this before, it's just a preliminary map. And what we hope to do with Rob Goodspeed's expertise is create a Zillow type map. So an interactive map, so you can click on your house and it will tell you if you have a racially restrictive covenant, and if so, what it says. I think you're right on the edge. Your house was built too early to have one.
Yeah, okay.
But my house had one. It was, going up the
Right.
hill. One thing I want to emphasize, when people look at this map and they look at their house and they see my house doesn't have a racially restrictive covenant, I'm okay. That is not the message we want them to take away from it. The message is, as white people, we have benefited from these racially exclusive policies, and our house has gone up 10% every single year. And the wealth of people in this country is generally built within the value of their home. And if non-white people are prohibited from buying those homes, they are deprived of that ability to build wealth, and they're stripped of wealth and opportunities and educational opportunities. And so, I think it's a collective issue that we have to all address together, and not think, oh, my house doesn't have one, and so I'm in the clear.
One final, I know we keep saying one final. So suppose you have a home that does have that. How do you, the homeowner, go about getting that removed?
We're working on it, and I'm very excited. It's a little too early to talk about what we have planned, but I'm very excited about it. Be glad to talk to you probably later this summer.
Great.
We got a plan for that.
Let us know. We'll have you back. We'd love to have you back.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, thanks for having me, and thanks for your work.
Thank you.
It was fantastic.
Bye.
Bye now. Okay. We do have a lot to do today, so let's just move on. Minutes. Can we have a motion to approve the minutes for the April meeting?
I move we approve the minutes for the April meeting.
We have a second?
I second.
Discussion. Has anybody found anything they would like to add, subtract, or change from these minutes? Excellent. And all in favor? Opposed? And it's accepted. A series of news notes that you might be interested in. Fair chance housing. We have, it passed, as I think you all know, it passed the city council unanimously. It went into effect 10 days afterwards, after it was published, which was about 10 days after the city council meeting. And we started receiving calls right away. I think at least 2 people have gotten housing because that is now law. We are still putting together the poster, and this is what it looks like so far. I didn't send you a copy because it's not quite final, but you can see it looks professional, and we didn't do it. You know, I mean, we worked on it. Linda did a lot of work on this, and so did Margaret, and it's almost right. I think it's only got a footnote left, but this should be hanging. Is it going to be a hanging poster, do you think?
It's going to be, well, it'll be available for download on both the city website and our website. And landlords are supposed to make either that or the information contained in it part of their application materials. And they are supposed to post it, but you know, these days it's not entirely clear what that means since so much is done online. But I assume if there is a rental office, it does have to be posted.
It's going to be in the tenants' rights book that the clerk maintains. There have been articles about it. And we have gotten calls from landlords asking to explain it. So we do know that it's out there. We might want to, wasn't there a group of Linda, a couple people who are working on the enforcement of this?
What do you mean?
The complaint form especially?
Oh yeah, I mean, right. I took our current website and I proposed some revisions, and Judah looked at it, Pam looked at it, you looked at it. And I also took the online complaint form that we've been using for the non-discrimination ordinance and just marked it up and ran it by Judah and Pam and you. All of that went to Denise and to Nick in IT. Denise has made the changes to the website, but we still don't have an active online complaint form for the fair chance access to housing. But I've been emailing with Nick today, and he had some questions, and it should be done and up pretty soon. I would think within a week.
So we're very close to having everything we need to have a process. And then we will have complaints theoretically. And what I think a group of us will meet when the first couple of complaints come in and come up with a process.
Can I say one other thing?
Sure, please.
I'm hopeful that at some point in the future, we can try to work with communications to make our website look a little spiffier. I know the city has its rules. Everything has to be uniform and all the commission sites have to look the same. But man, if you compare our site to some of the other cities, Human Rights Commission, complaint form sites, it's just, it's so dry and boring and, not user-friendly. And so my hope is that once we have all the information up there and more or less the way it needs to be, we can send it to somebody in communications and say, can you make this pop a little more? Can you make it, something that people really want to look at instead of so dry,
Yeah.
So we'll see. I don't know what they'll say, but I hope that they'll.
Linda, maybe we can give them some examples of the other cities' websites so that they have that to reference. And if municipalities are, granted there's differences, but they're pretty much organized the same way. So I'm thinking if we can illustrate rather than just telling them, go here for whatever and make it look the same or similar, we might meet with greater success than just saying,
for sure.
Fix it and make it look better.
If you feel like poking around sometime and you see anything, especially in Michigan, because that's what they like, send it to me and then I can compile them.
It's a good idea.
Thanks.
I'd like color. lots of things. Anyway, we'll have this poster we can put up there on the website too. Matter of fact. Okay. Is there, I guess we don't need to have people, do we need to know who's going to be interested in starting to tackle these problems before, or we'll wait until we get it, complaints?
Oh, do you mean the complaints that come in?
Yeah,
Oh, I think, well, we have a tentative committee of Pam, Judah, and
Okay.
me, right? But I mean, I think this is something we need to talk about in general at the strategic planning, like how we deal with complaints under both ordinances. So,
okay. Well, that brings us to the strategic planning committee meeting, or planning meeting. I sent you all, I'm sorry it took me so long, but it actually was a lot of work. The results of the exercise that you all completed. And I think that'll give us a good start on the strategic planning process. I want to ask you to do one thing, and that will give us an even better chance to begin, and that is take this chart that I made. What I did is I sort of did, I took, I compiled this so that you don't know who said what, but everybody's comments are on there. And sometimes I organize it. And for this chart, I did organize it. So here we've got everything that everybody said they would like to see the HRC address as our unique project in, say, 2021 and 2022. And there are quite a number of them, much more than we could ever do. I think we could probably do one big project, or maybe 2 or 3 big projects, but not. We've got 3 pages of them, I think. I gave you a blank column, and if you would just decide, read it all, and then go through it one by one, just put high, medium, and low for how interested you would be to work on this project. And try to be, don't make them all highs or all lows, try to be discriminate, give enough discrimination so that we can decide which ones we really want. And then I'll look at the ones.
But Leslie, the question is, would we personally like to work on it? Or do we want the commission to work on it?
A little bit of both. If you think, oh, I like all those other people to work on it, then maybe not.
No, but I mean, I think that could be a valid, I think we need a lot of things that aren't necessarily within the scope of my interest or ability.
Okay. Well, I think you're going to have to decide that on your own, whether you're going to put them high, medium, and low. If you think it's absolutely important and you don't want to do it, but you think there might be other people who would, put it high. But then what we're going to have to do is take at least the highs and maybe the highs and mediums and talk about them to refine them further. What I want to do is at least eliminate some of them, because we're not going to have a process that's that long. And as you're reading that, you might find that there's a hole. You might find, hey, no one has mentioned this, and that's really important. Add that on, and we'll talk about those also in the meeting. And then I would like you to give me some general guidelines about when you want this meeting to take place. I was hoping that we would have maybe 3 hours, and maybe that it'd have to be a posted meeting, but it would not be a televised meeting. Where we have a strategic planning session and we just talk. I would love to have it in person if that's possible. Could even be outside somewhere. I'll do a doodle to find out a time. But first of all, I'd like to know what month we're talking about. Do you want it in June? Do you want it in July? Do you want to wait until August? I don't want to wait too long, but I know people go out, sometimes they used to in the good old days go out, have vacations. Maybe people are planning that.
I mean, why don't we start? I mean, I'd like to do it as early in the year as possible.
Okay,
So I think shooting for June, and let's see if that's really feasible based
okay.
on people's availability.
Well, let me try a doodle for sometime in June first. Are you do you think weekdays or weekends?
Oh, I think we should include both
Okay.
possibilities.
And are you thinking days or evenings?
I would say weekday evenings would probably work best for most everybody, but we can definitely include both in the doodle poll.
Yeah, you know, Leslie, I would just make the doodle poll.
For all times. I mean,
No. I mean, obviously, you wouldn't want to start much before 9, whether you're on the weekend or the weekend.
right. Yeah.
And you don't want to end much beyond 9 either.
About how much time were you thinking it would run?
I'm guessing 3 hours. I think no one wants to be, you know.
We do have some people who work, I assume, Monday through Friday, 9 to whatever. So maybe weekday evenings or weekend days. I don't know. It's what I'm thinking.
I just think we should include it all.
Okay.
And then we'll just
Okay.
see where the overlap is.
Okay. Okay, I will get that done. I think that's all I have to say about strategic planning, but I think it's going to be very useful for us to have. It's been a long time coming. Town hall meeting plans. I met with Dilip and Aiden to talk about this, and I'm going to be talking to Lynn Song about it sometime later this week. But I also attended a town hall that was called by a social work graduate student at U of M. And I saw what happened there. It wasn't very well attended. It was kind of called at the, it was called quickly and wasn't well publicized. But we got a good sense of what kinds of things are out there and what kinds of things have to happen. The chief of police was there with 4 officers, and that was interesting to see. One of the things that came out of that, well, a couple things came out. One of the things that came out of it is that the people who were there in the community were kind of expecting the police to come up to them with a system, maybe a person who they could talk to. And I think they were expecting them to be able to handle all kinds of complaints. This is for the Asian community, as a way of, I don't know if I even said that, a way of addressing Asian hate. That there's a lot of fear in the community. I think that was at least true of the people who came to this one. And they didn't know what to expect, and they didn't know how to call the police. So, and many of them were very uncomfortable with the police, calling the police, the idea of calling the police. And so, and it also is clear that the police are probably not going to be the ones who they may tally up the calls they get, but they're not going to get the call. So if we really want to look at patterns, that's not going to be able to go through the police either. So I think there's a lot of things that they need us for, that we could be very useful for. Among other things, dealing with complaints that don't really take advantage of what the police are best at. Because there are a lot of just harassment, name calling, go home. We don't want you in this facility, that kind of stuff. And that's something that some of it is covered by freedom of speech, for example. And I'm not sure what the police can do. I'm not sure what we can do either, but we can at least there are things we can do.
Leslie, I am a little confused.
Okay.
Are you suggesting, I know you're not suggesting diverting someone's phone call from the police to a different complaint
No.
process? Or what are we talking?
Well, I don't know. I think what they want is a process,
Who's they?
the community.
Okay.
Many of the community don't speak English, for example, or don't feel that confident or don't feel that comfortable with police. So they're going to want a process.
If I can interject and shine some light on this, I think in my understanding, and Leslie, please correct me if I'm wrong, is that rather than call the police for perhaps a non-pressing issue, we will say, but they would like our government and our local officials to be notified of an instance of injustice. They could call a certain level, a certain number specifically for the instance of anti-Asian American hate, and they could have their solutions dealt with. I think furthermore as well, Leslie and Dilip and I talked about there being a translation piece to it, and that for many of our Asian residents, if they do not speak English, they would be able to have the capacity to report. If they were to call the police station for, again, let's just say a non-pressing issue, they would likely not have that translation piece as well. So it would not be a substitute for calling the police, but rather sort of a supplemental piece.
Right. I think that's fair.
Okay.
And what was the chief's response then to that request? Were they amenable to setting something like that up or no?
That was not covered very fully in the police. The police chief kept saying, police chief was very, I mean, he's very welcoming and very nice, but basically what he kept saying was, you have to call us because otherwise we don't know. We don't know what's going on in this community. And the people who were there were frustrated by that. They wanted them to know, they wanted them to be involved, and they wanted to be more proactive. And there's got to be I don't know exactly what happens. Obviously the second town hall they should be at also, because the more people see the police, the more likely it is they will feel like, I know them, we can talk to them. But it's not a complete answer. So I don't know yet, but I think that's something that we might have. I'm going to talk to Lin Song about it. I think there probably is a place for us in this. So I just wanted to warn you that that was taking place. And I'll keep you all informed. Old business, conversion therapy. If you remember correctly, 2 months ago, passed a conversion therapy ordinance and a resolution supporting it, but you weren't comfortable with it. And one of the reasons you weren't comfortable with it was that it really only dealt with people who were giving therapy, probably sitting in an office in Ann Arbor, I guess to anybody, any minors. Linda and Margie and I worked on this a lot, and John Reiser and Arian Slade, and we also talked to a lot of people elsewhere. So we had a solution to part of the problem that you addressed, where now we can cover any conversion therapy that's happening to any young person in Ann Arbor. We can't really regulate everything that goes on in the state, but we can regulate anything that goes on with one of our young citizens here, residents. And then we send out, Linda, you want to talk about this process instead of me?
Sure.
We sent this out to like 18.
So in addition to addressing that one concern after we passed it, which we did pretty quickly, Leslie then took the draft and sent it to the people who had been involved in this, and they included the Trevor Project, the Human Rights Campaign, who wanted to see it, had asked earlier. The lawyer for the National Center for Lesbian Rights, I think it's called.
National Center for Lesbian Rights.
Right. And we also sent it to, you may remember Andre Wilson and
Logan Casey.
Logan Casey, both of whom were members of the Human Rights Commission, both of whom have worked on these issues nationally, and Logan still is actually.
And the students from U of M Law School and.
Right, but we didn't hear back from them this time. Right, but Leslie sent it to a bunch of people. Oh, and the Professor Gary Harper, right? Is that his name? I think so.
Yes.
At the University of Michigan, who knows all about this, particularly in the state of Michigan. And they all sent us back comments, lots of redlining. What about this definition? What about that? So then we spent a long time looking at it again. We talked to Margaret, we talked to Joan Reiser. We realized that as far as the definitions go, that it needs to be consistent with the non-discrimination ordinance to the extent that some of those same words are defined in both. So if we were going to change it in this new ordinance, we need to change it in the non-discrimination ordinance. In the end, there are only 2 that we changed, and not very much. And you probably, if you read it again, wouldn't even recognize the difference. One is gender expression, and the other one is sexual orientation. But it doesn't really change it in any meaningful way. It's just choosing which one you like, and is it clearer or not clearer. But so I mean, you can take a look at those, make sure you like them. The other thing, let's see, what else changed? Anything?
Yes, there was a big change. We went from criminal to civil.
Oh, right. Sorry. So that was the other thing, right? So when we had first been talking about this, I think we'd sort of been assuming if the complaint was going to go to the police department, then it was going to be a criminal matter. But actually, a complaint can be investigated by the police department and still be a civil matter, where the standard of proof is lower than it would be if it was a criminal matter. So, and you can put in this case, the provider on the stand if it's a civil matter, whereas you couldn't necessarily do it if it was a criminal matter, because they don't have to if it's a criminal matter. So for those reasons, and because all of the national organizations felt very strongly that it be civil, surprisingly, and not criminal, because in general, they don't like the criminal justice system and they want to keep people out of it. We ended up switching it back to civil, but the complaint will still be investigated by the police because they are best positioned to have a detective go and interview people to figure it out.
And it's still 90 days and or.
No.
I mean,
just the
$500. It isn't
$500, yeah. Same as the non-discrimination ordinance. Yeah, Judah.
Hi, so I like everything and I'm not asking for any changes, and I hate to even say anything at this way past the 11th hour, but I just was talking to a alcohol expert about these things, and they made a suggestion that you probably already looked into, but the licensing board for the various therapists, I mean, that seems like a really good place to go. If do they recognize these as violations of their professional ethics, or do they recognize violations of a local ordinance as a violation of their professional ethics, even if it's not built into their own code? So I'm thinking, you have a therapist and they violate our ordinance, and we could go to their licensing board and have them sanctioned or, prohibited from practicing or something like that.
Well, as far as I know, there's no statewide restriction against doing conversion therapy. So you can be whether there's some national ethical standard, I don't know. But on the state level, you can be licensed to be a therapist who does conversion therapy.
Okay, all right, that was,
yeah.
all right, so never mind.
there are like 20 states, right, that have outlawed it, but Michigan is not one of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Our next
And
project.
that may be something we would consider doing if we had somebody who was not convinced other ways, and could be. Evidently, what we've talked to people in states that have this ordinance, and what we were told, where conversion therapy is really very active, what we've been told is they supervise somebody who is not as vulnerable as they are. So they may supervise nurses, or they may supervise people whose professions wouldn't cover this at all. The odd people are doing this kind of therapy, and this may be supervised by somebody who is a licensed psychologist or social worker or something.
And we did at first propose broadening it past to include providers beyond those who are licensed by the state. But the city attorney's office was not comfortable with that. So we went back to the way it was.
Right. That's
Right.
Which
Thank you.
covers almost everybody you'd want to cover anyway. So I think it's fine.
I think we're okay. So we're going to ask you to vote on this. Are you ready? We have a motion to approve
Okay, I move to approve the final draft
really final.
of this conversion therapy ordinance to ban conversion therapy in Ann Arbor.
I second.
I second as well.
All in favor?
I
Opposed? Did you oppose it, Pam? Thank you. So it was unanimous. That will be sent. Now, there is also a resolution to urging City Council to pass this. It is, you have passed it all except for one whereas. And that is the whereas that is three whereases, the third whereas from the bottom. So I'd like you to make sure you've read that, and are you willing to pass this again with that addition? You ready? Can I have a motion to accept this resolution to ban the use of conversion therapy on minors?
move that we accept.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Yay. This will go to City Council. Okay, the next thing we have is a resolution in support of heightened sensitivity to the impact of speech on others. Have you all read this? Any thoughts, comments, changes? Can we have a motion to accept?
Could I just hold it for just one moment?
Okay.
Because I did read it, but I've got to pull it back up again because it was a question I had that
Okay.
I forgot to. Oh, yeah. It was up in the first whereas,
Yes.
and I wonder about the way we try to give people an example of the type of topics that might produce hate speech.
Hmm.
And I wonder if there's a way that rather than just list what's always an incomplete list, we try to describe it, more broadly, because of a characteristic or.
What I do at work when I talk to people about, conversations that are inappropriate for the workplace, I typically describe it as conversations that stir emotion in people. You guys are better at words than I am, but sometimes I'll talk about try to steer away from hot topics or things that you're hearing about in media. So I'm not sure that we can use that kind of language, but typically hate speech, arguments, those kinds of things are often brought about because people are having conversations about things that are near and dear to them, are emotional for them. So I'm just tossing ideas out there, Keita.
No, I just worry about what's always a partial list. And it doesn't really say what the speech has to be about, the hate speech or the.
Yeah, and we want to certainly cast a broad umbrella because, right, when we use a list that's incomplete, people go, well, that's not listed.
Yes, and any list is incomplete when.
Right.
You have to suggest some wording, I think. I'm not sure what to do with what you're saying, but I understand that examples would be nice.
That a growing use of insensitive language that, in some ways it's a pejorative that characterizes a trait or activity as pejorative or negative or something to be disparaged. Because there's a lot of ways you can, all of the microaggressions, we mean those too. But, they oftentimes are rooted in something very nondescript, right? So if someone were to do a policy that I have to wear a hairnet, but no one else in the serving line has to wear a hairnet, right? I get it, and I get what's being said. It's just not, if I came to you, you wouldn't be able to say, yeah, that's a clear-cut case of insensitive speech.
It has to be, you said pejorative, disparaging. I think you used another word.
Language or conduct.
Yes, in some ways, we're talking about name calling.
Really, you're talking about a characterization. Taking something, a very human activity, and characterizing it as something that it's not, something negative, something damning, something evil, bad, wrong, different.
It applies to a whole group of people of a certain protected class. You have to come up with some language. I don't know what to do with it. Yeah,
I guess I'm pausing because I'd like to know what a good version of this would accomplish. Like, what do we want to accomplish? What kind of speech or conduct are we trying to, block?
We're responding, Kita, to what to a particular city council person's speech that did in fact target to
Oh.
protected groups.
Right?
Groups that whose members are protected by our non-discrimination ordinance.
Mm. Well, then with that context, I feel it's too, I don't know, non-potent, impotent. It's not, I mean, we're not saying be more sensitive to the impact of what you say on other people. We really want to say something stronger than that, right?
Well, what we're really doing, I think, is thanking City Council for having said it and having stood up for not confronting people, leaders who are using that kind of language.
Okay.
I almost wonder, and I'm pivoting the conversation a bit, if we want to be a bit more explicit in that, because if the sort of intent of this resolution was not all that clear to many of us who read it, even with sort of the context, maybe we could be a bit more explicit and sort of give sort of, I don't want to say an outline of what happened, but be a bit more descriptive in what we're looking to say. Furthermore, I also just, in the name of conversation, I also wanted us to think, and I don't have an answer to this, if we would also want to offer more of a call to action or encouragement of something following the event. I know that City Council was firm in its position in that is not to be tolerated, but as a Human Rights Commission, do we want to call on something to happen? And I feel like we could also, I think the language is fine as is. I would feel comfortable passing it, but I would not be against if we were to sort of be more have more of a stance in this.
I mean, what was said strikes me as going beyond insensitive.
It does say hateful too, but yeah.
I know, but we don't, I mean, we're saying it was hateful and disparaging or demeaning or deprecating.
We could. Yes.
Insensitive was the least of its problems.
I think we were trying to be forward-looking since it's sort of, it's done and City Council acted.
And there's potential recall involved, so we don't want to. I don't know.
What don't we want to do?
I don't think we want to pile on. It's a political. We've got people who voted for this person.
Yeah, I think that there is that we can unwittingly do harm by describing a significant harm in a way that diminishes its real impact and strength and potency. So if this is in response to that, then I think saying, what happened, one of the impacts was one of the more salient features was its insensitivity. It was demeaning. It disparaging. It was a lot of very strong things. So I would like to go with one of the stronger words and not, try to smooth this out as being insensitive.
I
Okay,
propose then, rather than us trying to wordsmith it now, that Aiden and Kita work on it, and, you know, and we wait and we pass it next time. I know it would be ideal to do it now, but it'd be better to do something that we're all happy with, even if it means waiting. What do you think?
I'm comfortable doing that, but I'm also comfortable passing this. I more so wanted to ascertain what the general sort of message it was that we're trying to pass with this resolution. I was unsure if this was supposed to be more of a call to action, and if it is, we should definitely be more explicit in that. But if this is just to bolster the efforts of City Council, I recognize that that is important as well, and I'd be more than happy to pass it. But if Kita, if you feel strongly that you would like to rework some of the language, I'd be more than happy to assist you with that if need be.
I would like to just not fall back on the lowest common denominator when we describe what was said, you know. So yes, I would like at least a substitute for the word insensitive.
oh, so is it just the one word?
I think if we replace that with something that was, right, the growing use of demeaning and or hateful language.
I wouldn't have any trouble with that.
Demeaning characterizations, I mean, something, right? Yeah.
No issue with that as well.
Demeaning or disparaging?
Mm-hmm. Let's say demeaning. I think that's
Okay, instead of insensitive.
mm-hmm.
Okay. Hey, Linda, are you okay? Is everybody else okay with that?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't, you know, just to be clear, I didn't write this. I just edited it a little, but I just, it says insensitive all the way through it. So if you want to change it, it's not just there that word is used. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
so.
Yeah, I mean, I'm
can,
happy
yeah.
to do
Or we could use three words. I mean, insensitive.
Yeah, I don't know if demeaning quite gets at it either. It's to me, demeaning is actually less strong in some ways.
You think?
I was thinking that, and this is something that I've used recently and in times past. And I don't know if we want to necessarily add it to this, but I'm just throwing it out. And to your point, Kita, I have used the following: attitude, behavior, and conduct that results in, and then put insensitive and or, because I think that I know we're looking for something that is succinct, that describes everything, but there's no one word that's going to do that. But I think, so I'm following ABC, attitude, behavior, and conduct that results in, that causes harm.
Would you say speech and conduct? I think of behavior and conduct as being the same.
Yeah, it was speech in this case anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So,
but I'm saying preface after whereas, preface it with, you know, attitude, behavior, and conduct, and then concluded with that causes harm. Mm-hmm. And that's broad enough without being too narrow and restrictive. And I think succinctly covers a broad area, which is what we want, without getting into so specific that it limits us.
Yeah. Aiden, you really like that? I don't, in this case, I'm not sure what the harm was. Although it was certainly people.
We don't want to define the harm. We don't want to, because it could be anything. So I want to leave it open enough that we can say, you know, and I know it's going to be subjective in some respects, depending on the incident and how people interpret that, but I would not define the harm.
Okay, we've got two things, two suggestions. One would be either demeaning and or hateful speech or disparaging, I guess, or hateful speech. And the other would be I don't know what to do with this, Pam. An attitude, behavior, or conduct that causes harm. To me is in this case more general, so general that I don't know that they'll know what we're talking about.
Well, I would say, for example, the third, the first where we have insensitive, which is the third whereas,
Yes.
I would word it as attitude, behavior, and conduct that results in insensitive and or hateful speech causes great harm. So I'm just prefacing, you know, the sentence after the whereas. And the same thing for each time that you have insensitive.
Yeah.
I think Linda's right.
Do we have to talk about, we have to,
Yeah, I don't think we can do it here.
okay, okay.
Right.
So Keita, will you do it with Aiden? Okay. Okay. Then we will table this.
We did this, one of the reasons this resolution came about was because we had a few requests,
Right.
including a complaint. So I had an exchange with the woman who wrote the complaint, who had some suggestions, which we incorporated some of into this, but I'll send it to you.
Good idea.
And Kita, so you can,
Okay.
she had some good ideas.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Okay. I think we're now going to move on then to the Crown Project. And you'll return this at our next meeting, right? Okay. Travis wants to talk to us about a Crown amendment to the non-discrimination ordinance. And it would go, if you see what I sent you, it would go, it would be added to the definitions in the non-discrimination ordinance in page 3 of what I sent you. It's an amendment to the definition of, well, it is part of the definition of race. It is an inclusion to race as a part of the definition. Travis, you want to talk about some of the reason how this came to be?
Yeah, I'm happy to, and I hope that everyone can hear me. I apologize, I've been off most of the time. I had an unstable connection and your audio was cutting out. So if that happens, wave at me or something and I'll try. So the Crown campaign is an organization that was started by the company Dove, the National Urban League, the Color of Change, and the Western Center on Law and Poverty. And they, Crown stands for Creating a Respectful and Open World for Natural Hair. And so they have a pretty straightforward and very simple, as you can see from the proposed amendment, definition to include in non-discrimination laws that extends protection under the definition of race to traits associated with race, particularly in this case, hair textures and protective hairstyles. I actually do have, there is one change from the version that Leslie sent out, because after speaking with some local African-American leaders, they asked me to specifically include head wraps as a named protective hairstyle. And so it actually ends with hairstyles, such hairstyles as braids, locks, twists, and head wraps. And so this was largely started in 2019. California passed the first amendment to their statewide law. And since then, actually just last month, Delaware became the 9th state that passed it. So it has passed in 9 states overall. But here in Michigan, State Representative Sarah Anthony, who represents the Lansing area, has introduced an amendment to the Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act. And this, it's co-sponsored by our local reps, Felicia Brabeck and Yusuf Rabi. And this mirrors that essentially. I have included head wraps, but otherwise it's identical. And I think part of the reason why this is important is because Dove actually conducted a workplace study on this as part of launching this campaign, and identified a lot of the discrimination that happens. You know, I think many of us have personally probably witnessed at least microaggressions around Black hair in the workplace. I've certainly seen that happen, and we've had difficult conversations in my workplace about that because we witnessed it happening. But one of the things that came out of Dove's study was that Black women were 30% more likely to be made aware of a formal appearance policy than white women. 80% of Black women were more likely to have to change their hairstyle to its natural or from its natural state in order to fit into the office. Black women were 1.5% or 1.5 times more likely to be actually sent home from their workplace because of their hair. And they were 3.4 times more likely to be perceived as unprofessional based on their hair. And so the inclusion of this as a protected, we also saw very recently, actually, there was a case in the schools in Mount Pleasant where a young African-American student had her hair cut by a teacher without her parents' permission. So we know that it's a problem here in Michigan. Unfortunately, there doesn't seem to be a lot of movement in the state legislature right now, but the Crown campaign and State Representative Sarah Anthony in particular is really leading the charge to try to grow momentum across the state. And so just this last month, Ingham County, Flint, and Lansing have all passed similar amendments to their local non-discrimination ordinances. And I was hoping to be able to join them here by introducing this to City Council at hopefully our next meeting even, with your blessing. We have intentionally, I've spoken to a few of you by email, we have intentionally not included a definition of race broadly in our non-discrimination ordinance because I think any attempt to do so would likely be unintentionally exclusionary. But by adding this as an extra inclusion in the definition of race would hopefully add some additional protections for folks locally. So that's largely what I have. I have spoken with a number of community leaders. Councilmember Nelson wants to sign on as a co-sponsor as well, and so I chatted with her. And so I've spoken with a number of folks, but I wanted to get your feedback as well, and hopefully your blessing so that we could move forward with this and kind of join the growing momentum statewide to really push this forward.
Do you need a resolution, or would an informal blessing be sufficient?
that would be fine. I did not draft a resolution. I mean, you could certainly do a motion of support or something like that if you wanted to. I would absolutely appreciate that.
Okay. And are you going to include head wraps?
I am going to include head wraps. That came at the suggestion of Crystal Dupree, a local school board member, and everyone that I've run it by said yes, absolutely, please include that because it often gets left out.
Judah?
Travis, I think it's great. I wish it had been in place when I worked in the courthouse. Would have been very helpful.
Aiden?
Yeah, I also just want to give my full-throated support for this, and thank you, Travis, for taking the lead on this effort. I've even had instances in the workplace like this. They're incredibly awkward, and I don't think that if anybody in Ann Arbor should be subjected to such awkwardness. And as well, I think that it would be great to have this happen in that it is really creating a momentum, and I think that even efforts like this could push our state legislator to hopefully do more in this area as well and pass something similar to what Travis has drafted. And yeah, I think that it shouldn't be a problem.
And Travis, I'm glad you spoke to the issue of why there was no definition of race. Because I wondered whether we shouldn't have some clause that makes it clear that we all are aware that race is a scientifically debunked concept. There's
Well,
no such thing.
well, yeah, if you say that in your ordinance, however, I don't know, it's gonna make it harder to enforce.
No, you can still be discriminated against on the basis of this old-fashioned notion of race.
Mhm.
Even though it's been scientifically debunked, I just don't think we want to make it appear as though we that the city believes that race is a bona fide scientific concept.
Well, and I do think I thought about this a little bit because Linda and I had a bit of an exchange on this as well about whether or not we needed to try to come up with a definition. And I think the important part is that the discrimination happens around the societally accepted definition of race. And I think that that can evolve. And I think it's really important for us, if we try to start defining something, we could actually get to a place where we've now excluded people because we've tried to define something that is somewhat more fluid.
No, and I'm not suggesting that we define it. I'm just suggesting that we make it clear that the city does not hold the view that race is a scientific construct. It's a sociological construct.
Right.
But
I don't,
Just, go ahead, sorry.
Hayden?
I don't necessarily know if any of the language in this, and please correct me if I'm wrong, specifically states that it is a scientific construct. I think that so the language lends to it that it is a socially understood construct and accepted construct.
Right.
But
We've also got things like ethnicity, which is also some people talk about ethnic. It's another thing that if people think that you're discriminating on the basis of ethnicity, they are. And I think that's.
but there is a definition of ethnicity.
No, it's not defined here, I don't think.
Culture, which can include nationality, religion, and language. And that is under the definitions 9.
Number 8.
15, number 8.
It's number 8.
Oh, it is, okay.
And that's exactly because it was redlined in the version that I saw.
Right.
Indicating that it was being changed, and I just think.
No, it was added.
Or added, but I just think that race should be similarly. At least we're using the word. We know that it's been used in a oppressive manner for hundreds of years. There are people who still believe that it's a valid scientific construct.
Judah?
So, Kita, I mean, I'm with you on the scientific question, but legally, there's language that makes race a protected class, and we're trying to give the same protection to people who are wearing their hair as we would.
No, I have no issue with
So, but if you start to get into the invalidity of, I'm not sure what you're adding by attacking the validity of the category of race, if it is a legally protected class that we're trying to use to protect other expression.
No, I know, I appreciate that, but discrimination has its roots in this concept of race, and in this concept of this profound sort of biological difference.
Travis?
We can go forward with this without addressing.
Yeah, and
we can always circle back later.
I almost wonder, too, if this is maybe something that the body would want to state as a value, but not necessarily include explicitly in the ordinance because of the potential legal implication of its enforceability. And
Okay, I don't see how it, looking at it scientifically versus sociologically or legally, would impact its enforceability. I just think it begins to articulate an issue that I think it's important that we begin to take seriously, which is that it's a non-existent trope. And yet we continue to use it as though it's a real thing.
I think, Kita, it would make an interesting resolution for Ann Arbor to take a stand on the fact that race is socially constructed. It would put a marker on there, and you know, maybe others would take note, and there you could start building some momentum, because I think you're right. I mean, we all agree on this concept. And maybe a resolution puts a marker in the sand, so to speak, to start shifting the paradigm a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to see you draft something and let's see what it looks like.
I will.
No, seriously.
I think that the conversation that we just had with Professor, was it Steinberg?
Yes.
Concerning, you know, what does it look like? What does it feel like when you're reading statutes or policies or deeds or contracts that pertain to you, and yet here you are being distinguished in this non-scientific way, and been categorized like this for hundreds of years, and you continue to be, because we aren't addressing it out loud.
Mm-hmm. No, it's true. And in fact, he said Jews were once considered non-white, Italians were, Irish were.
Mm-hmm. And these clauses remained in these deeds because people looked at it as harmless.
Mm-hmm.
That's my point.
Mm-hmm.
Just begin to say, you know what? Maybe it isn't so harmless. Continue to use these concepts and give meaning to them and give life to them without trying to address the harm that we do every day that it lives, right?
Yeah.
That's what I was trying to say. Like, well, let's look at this just as we examine these, you know, racial covenants. We people, I'm sure 50 years ago laughed about them too. Like, well, it's not enforceable, no harm, no foul, right?
I think you should try to draft something and
I will
pose it to us. See, let's see
Travis, I
like.
absolutely
That's a good idea.
The additional language and the inclusion of
okay.
benefit care and health protection.
Let's go back to this one for now because it's on here, and we probably will keep it on here regardless of our resolution, right? Is that what you're thinking? Well, it doesn't matter. We'll see. We'll deal with that when it comes.
Yeah.
Any more discussion about hair? The Crown resolution. Linda?
I'm just going to make a motion.
Okay.
So I move that the Human Rights Commission heartily supports the addition of this definition in the non-discrimination ordinance.
I second.
Okay, discussion?
Maybe I should say the Crown definition.
Actually, we need the exact wording, so say it again.
Uh-oh, somebody help me.
Denise, did you pick up the wording for that? No.
Yes, I did.
Oh, you did? Okay, could you read to
So
us?
just substitute the Crown language for this, if that's okay. If anybody wants to improve it, feel free.
No, say what the motion is though.
I just said it. The Human Rights Commission moves to or heartily approves the inclusion of this Crown language in the non-discrimination ordinance. I don't know. Somebody want to make that better?
Inclusion of
Okay, okay. I have to say something.
Okay.
Okay. Is the definition inclusive of traits historically associated with race? Am I reading that right?
What it says.
Number 25, right?
It's not the definition of race. It says the definition of race also includes. And that's what it means.
But yes, that is how it reads, Kita.
Right, okay. And I guess we mean the ones that I associate, or is it ones that an employer might associate? Like, is it, we're protecting self-identification and self-expression. But what if, I guess I'm a little confused about how far we go with traits. Travis, is it only about hair?
I mean, it is explicit about hair. I also noticed that it says traits historically associated with race, which potentially could provide for broader protection. And then it goes on to explicitly talk about hair. That is the language that is used in all of the versions that have been passed so
Okay.
far.
All right. Okay. Sorry, Linda, keep going.
I'm done. Unless somebody wants to be more
I think
articulate
it
than I
says
just
the
was.
HRC moves to heartily approve the inclusion of the wording of this Crown resolution in the non-discrimination ordinance.
Maybe we should say unanimously and enthusiastically. How about
Yeah.
that?
Well, at the end of it, when it happens, we say this was passed unanimously by.
Okay, then how about enthusiastically?
Enthusiastic.
I go with that.
Okay. Do we have the wording? The HRC moves to enthusiastically approve the inclusion of this wording in the Crown resolution. The inclusion of this wording in the Crown resolution.
No.
Oh.
To include.
In the non-discrimination ordinance,
Yes.
to include the
The
Crown.
wording in the Crown resolution, right?
No.
Didn't we just read it?
I did just read it. I screwed it up. The HRC moves to enthusiastically approve the inclusion of this wording.
Crown language in the non-discrimination ordinance. That's good enough.
Language in the non-discrimination ordinance. Okay.
And I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? No one. Good.
Thank you, everyone. I will likely have this on the agenda. I will have this on the agenda at our June 7th meeting. I think Councilmember Nelson still wants to co-sponsor, and I think a few others likely will as well. So thank you so much for your support on that.
Thank you for bringing it to us. Anything else? Do we have any new business? Do we have any commissioner information? What do we call it? Comments? Travis.
Yes, I just wanted to briefly let everyone know that our fellow commissioner Aisha did have her baby.
Yeah,
and
yes.
so Isaac was welcome to the world, and both he and his mom are doing well. Because we're on CTN, I won't put the picture up on the screen just in case she wouldn't want that. But she is doing very well, and he is very, very cute. So
He is cute.
I just wanted you all to know that. She said she wished she could be here tonight.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. Somebody want to make a motion to adjourn? Then No other comments, there's no comments?
Do Aiden or Dilip, do either of you want to give a brief update on where we are with the facial recognition stuff at all? I don't want to take us too much longer. I know it's been a long meeting, but I'm also happy to give a brief update, but I've talked a lot already.
Well,
Why don't you go ahead, Travis?
All right. Our working group has met a couple of times now. We met both before and after the community hosted town hall. And so at our last meeting, we had both Chief Cox and Attorney Slay there with us to talk about kind of some of the ways in which the city does and does not use this technology already. And so while the city does not utilize facial recognition in the course of their own investigations or to issue a warrant locally, they do occasionally partner with the state police or federal authorities, and facial recognition technology may be used. One of the loopholes is that actually the city can at any point request that the state police use facial recognition on their behalf. And so it kind of allows us as a city to say we're not using it while actually requesting that it be used on our behalf. So that's something that we need to address. Attorney Slade did also mention that there are some additional ways that facial recognition technology has been used that would likely not be super objectionable, but we might unintentionally ban. And so she wanted us to be aware of the fact that there have been times when the only way that they have been able to identify a body is by using facial recognition technology to notify next of kin. And so there are some circumstances where the city might be using it. But those are all things that were kind of essentially the direction we got from Attorney Slay was let us know like how you want to craft this. And I think all came to the agreement we want this as an ordinance, not as a resolution kind of saying that we're opposed to it, but rather an ordinance on this. And then we're essentially working with her at this point to get a draft that then we can start having stakeholders review. So that's kind of where we are. Dilip, Aiden, am I leaving anything out? Okay. So I just wanted to keep you informed since you have a stake in this working group, and and we will certainly keep you informed as we have kind of a final draft. I think it's likely that the working group will come back to both ICPOC and HRC and ask for feedback before we finalize it again and send it out. So.
Great. Thank you very much. Anything else? Any more commissioner comments or anything? And we will close if somebody will make a motion to do so. Julia?
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much, folks. Have a wonderful May, and I will try to send you a doodle and we'll come up with something in June. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye now.
Bye.
Take
Bye.
care.